Have you ever seen an NFL narrative shift so quickly? The Vikings went from 3 quarters of inept football to a fourth quarter where the narrative completely shifted. JJ McCarthy combines for 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and the Vikings put up 21 points, erasing a double-digit 11-point deficit and winning at Soldier Field. On this podcast, we're going to dive into all of it, and I'm going to tell you how and when the narrative shifted, what caused it to shift. This podcast is presented by 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis. Affordable transformations, beautiful solutions. Don't wait 8 weeks for your bathroom to get remodeled. Get your bathroom remodeled in 48 hours. You heard me right, 48 hours. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis. All right, Vikings down 17-6 going into the fourth quarter. And what's so interesting about that is it was an 11-point game. Far from over. Yet, it felt like the Vikings were down by 50 based on how the offense had been moving throughout the contest. Because as soon as they put a drive together, for really the first time all game, J.J. McCarthy threw his first NFL touchdown pass to Nashawn Wright, the Chicago Bears corner. And then it's like it took all the wind out of the sails. The Vikings were finally moving, finally finding a groove. And then McCarthy basically lollipopped a ball to Nashawn Wright, and it felt like in that moment the game was over. But they were only down 11, and the Bears offense hadn't been doing much in the second half, or really anything since after the first quarter. Caleb Williams, again, a narrative shift. He starts the game with 10 straight completions, and then at the end of the game, can't hit DJ Moore wide open, about 15 yards wide open, and he overshoots him, not in the end zone, he overshoots him out of bounds, and completely uncatchable pass. So this game was all about the narrative shifting about J.J. McCarthy and Caleb Williams. But back to McCarthy. At halftime, the Vikings had 80 yards of offense on 19 plays. They had 4 3-and-outs on 6 series, and they were 0 for 5 on third down. McCarthy had 20 passing yards before the final throw he had to Jalen Naylor at the end of the second quarter. So, by all means, the first half was a catastrophic failure by the Vikings offense. They were losing the game in the trenches. They had no running game. McCarthy had no rhythm. Here comes the third quarter. End of the third quarter, the Vikings have 85 yards of offense. Second half adjustments, halftime adjustments, they were invisible. Nothing changed. The Bears were still dominating the trenches in this game, and the Vikings invested so much money this offseason in fixing those trenches because of what happened against the Los Angeles Rams in their playoff game last year. And all of this is without the Bears' 2 best corners and their best linebacker. So the recipe was there for the Vikings to dominate this game from start to finish because the Bears are missing their best players defensively. And Justin Jefferson isn't getting open, or McCarthy isn't finding him. Adam Thielen in his return back to Minnesota, dropping passes. And what's so interesting about it is the Vikings looked impossibly bad for the first 3 quarters. Like, it was so bad that it couldn't have gone any worse. Thielen was dropping passes. Jefferson was dropping a pass. The trenches, they were getting beat up in the trenches. That because it was so bad in the first 3 quarters, there was actually a hope that it couldn't get any worse in the fourth quarter. Because the offense was so out of rhythm, there was only one way for the offense to go, and that was up. That was forward. Because it couldn't have gotten any worse. And that's what you saw. When Thielen dropped it, I'm like, it can't get any worse, so it's only going to get better as this game continues. And in the fourth quarter, things turned. And in the fourth quarter, McCarthy combined for 3 touchdowns, 2 passing and 1 rushing, which I'm going to talk about in a second here. But he goes 6 for 8, 87 yards throwing, accumulated 101 yards throwing and rushing, and the Minnesota Vikings dominated the point of attack. The first 3 quarters, Christian Darisaw's replacement was hot garbage. The offensive line was getting destroyed, and McCarthy couldn't find a rhythm. And then in the fourth quarter, Jordan Mason, Vikings running back, established the running game behind the offensive line. And they started to break down the Bears' defensive line, and it opened up passing opportunities. And that's how McCarthy found his rhythm. And then he finds Justin Jefferson for the first touchdown. And I tweeted this during the game. I said, if the Vikings score a touchdown here, Caleb Williams is going to throw a pick. And he didn't throw a pick, but he fell apart. As soon as the Bears offense had to face adversity, as soon as the Vikings gained momentum, the Bears fell apart. And Caleb Williams became a shell of himself, became a completely different player than he was in the first quarter. And all offseason, I've talked about this about McCarthy. I've never wavered on the mentality that he has as a quarterback or as a player, as a man. Because if there is anything that I know about McCarthy without knowing him personally, based on things you read and watch, it is that his mentality is his strongest characteristic. And talking to reporters after the game, Aaron Jones unveiled what McCarthy told his team in the huddle while they were still down 11. He says, is there any place you'd rather be? You don't hear that from quarterbacks down 11 that have just performed the worst 3 quarters in NFL debut history. I mean, this was awful. This is as bad a start as anyone could hope for. Coming off of Darnold's season and the Aaron Rodgers game on Sunday, the hope was that McCarthy would come in and showcase to the world that the Vikings made the right decision to pass on Aaron Rodgers, to lowball Sam Darnold, to take away their contract from Daniel Jones and put all trust in J.J. McCarthy. And then he goes out and performs this. 48 yards at halftime, 80 yards at the end of the third quarter. This was historically bad. And then he says, is there any place you'd rather be? That is a player that loves to fight and show off his perseverance. He was embracing the moment of toughness, not crumbling into a ball with his hands on his head, not knowing where to go next. This is a man that is tough mentally. This is a type of game that you see mid-season, where the season could go one or two ways. The team could go into a shell and fall apart, or the team could come together, pull off this historic comeback, and then really gather momentum for the rest of the year. This was game one. And McCarthy already had the locker room respect because he was named captain. But nobody had this amount of trust or respect in him than they do now because of the mentality that he showcased in the fourth quarter, his toughness, his perseverance, his never giving up attitude, and let's be honest about it, the throws he made and the rushing touchdown. None of it is possible without those things, of course. You know, the mentality is great, the perseverance is amazing, but you've also got to have the arm and the legs to do it. The mentality is worthless if you aren't going to make a good throw, aka Tim Tebow. But it's one thing for the Vikings to go out and smash the Bears 41 donut. It's another to come back from down 11 when nothing is going your way, and then you pull out a victory in the fourth quarter. Because that embodies a player and a team showcasing that, hey, we are never out of a game. And did you see the reaction from McCarthy's teammates after he scored that rushing touchdown? They were jumping all over him. Kevin O'Connell was ecstatic on the sideline. And that is not happening if the Vikings win 41-0. But because of the way they won, it was actually better than winning 41-0. Because of the hurdles that they had to battle after 3 quarters of poor football. And after a win, there's always video of Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings players after the game in the locker room. And in the Vikings locker room after the game, Kevin O'Connell had so many great things to say about McCarthy. But specifically, I want you to pay attention to McCarthy's teammates and how they're reacting to O'Connell giving McCarthy a game ball.
This happens. This feeling that we have right now does not happen without one other guy. All right? Did not go the way any of us wanted. This guy, all right, I could tell from the jump, he was poised. He was poised. But this guy didn't quit me, and you always thought he would figure it out. 2 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown all in the second half. That's why you guys put a C on his chest. That's why he's going to break his chest right now.
Hey, this is the beginning, but I think we proved something to ourselves tonight. We know what we got in the tape, and let's let it out every week. On to the next one, boys. Family on me, family on 3, 1, 2, 3. Family!
J.J. McCarthy has something that is uncoachable, and that is his fiery attitude and mentality. Some players, you got to say, hey, come on, let's get a little pop here. Come on, let's get a little energy. Let's have some composure. And you don't have to coach that in McCarthy. He has it, whatever that it is. The it of being fiery. I'm not saying he's going to be a Hall of Fame player by any means, but I'm saying he has that natural leadership ability within a locker room, and he's only 22 years old. So he has that it. Something that needs to be brought up about this game is McCarthy's timeline and experience. Because, yes, he looked poor in the first 3 quarters of this game, but you also need context with how terrible he played. Yes, he was awful. Yes, he didn't have a feel or a rhythm in the pocket. But it was also his first real competitive game in almost 2 years. His last real competitive game was the national championship game at Michigan. Yes, he played a preseason game last year, and yes, he's done training camp stuff and preseason and all that garbage. But there's nothing that can replace real in-game NFL competitive reps. You can't replace what he did in Chicago on Monday night with a practice or a preseason game. Those in-game NFL reps cannot be replicated in some simulated fashion. So this was his first game in a year and a half. And when you speak that out loud, I think you can kind of sit back and, okay, those first 3 quarters were understandable. He hasn't played an NFL competitive football game in a year and a half. He has not taken meaningful drops behind the center in a year and a half. He has not had to read a disguised defense, an NFL level defense, ever throughout his entire career. And now he's trying to do it without playing football in a year and a half. So I think context needs to be evaluated and discussed when looking at McCarthy's poor first 3 quarters. And I think a lot of that can be pointed to what happened in the fourth quarter. Yes, the Vikings dominated the trenches, but McCarthy started to find his rhythm throughout the contest. And in the fourth quarter, it went from, man, this can't get any worse, to finally we're starting to see something happening. And I think that's fair. For anyone in any profession who takes 21 months off really competitive work. And then we saw it. All right, let me talk about McCarthy's rushing touchdown. But again, let me tell you about 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis, because I want you to take a look at this video. This is what they did for us in our bathroom in 48 hours. New floor, new shower, new surround. They got rid of our mold. We went from a single to a double sink. Got a new mirror, vanity counter, the whole shebang. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis remodeled our entire bathroom in 48 hours. We didn't wait 8 weeks and cram into our teeny tiny bathroom. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis is your answer to big projects and small projects, because they will get them done in 48 hours. 5-Star Bath Solutions of Minneapolis. Affordable transformations, beautiful solutions. All right. McCarthy's run. It was shotgun. Jordan Mason was in the backfield behind him. And Mason really has had an explosive fourth quarter. The Vikings running game really found something. The offensive line opened some holes, and Jordan Mason fought through some weak arm tacklers. And in that fourth quarter, the Vikings are sitting at a 3rd and 1. Huge moment of this game, because they kick a field goal and the Bears have an opportunity to go down the field and score a touchdown, tie the game, go into overtime, and who knows what happens next. 3rd and 1. Shotgun formation. McCarthy, Mason, quarterback, read option. And Mason has just been killing the Bears defensively in the fourth quarter. And McCarthy has the EQ to read the situation appropriately. Nobody's expecting McCarthy to hold on to the ball. When you have a big, bruising running back like Mason, who has dominated the fourth quarter and really opened up the passing game and running game, McCarthy holds on to the ball and takes it into the end zone himself. which also opens up another dynamic of the Vikings offense that they really hadn't had before. And you've got to be careful because you don't want to abuse this power and use it too much. But it was perfect in a situation like this. You haven't busted it out all game. And he waited until 3rd and 1 for McCarthy to do a quarterback run option. And he holds on to the ball, surprises the entire Bears defense, and runs it into the end zone. That play showed so much EQ of McCarthy because he faked everybody out. I think he probably faked out even his own teammates because everyone in the world thought that that ball was going to Jordan Mason. And the Bears defensive end, who's supposed to keep contain on the quarterback, completely broke contain and went towards Mason because that's where everybody thought the ball was going. And McCarthy had the intelligence to hold on to the ball and fake everybody up. All right, last one more point, and this point needs to be made. Not to be a party ruiner or whatever, a Debbie Downer, but this win was an unsustainable way of winning. Not many times are you going to go 3 quarters of complete garbage football offensively, and then you're able to flip a switch for the 4th quarter. It happened on Monday night, and it was an epic win. But things need to change next week against the Atlanta Falcons. The Vikings cannot put together this formula and expect to win again this season. Yes, they did it on Monday night, and it showcased McCarthy's perseverance. And that's cool. But even the Vikings will tell you things need to change in the first 3 quarters because that was not a sustainable formula for winning in the NFL. The Bears were overcome by the Vikings defense in the 4th quarter. They finally sacked Caleb Williams after he escaped 5 or 6 or 7 sacks early in the game. But the Vikings offense needs to start out much stronger. And I guarantee you that that will be a point of emphasis this week as they prepare for Sunday night against the Atlanta Falcons. We need to start out stronger than we did against the Chicago Bears. We're not going to get gifts like that again this season. So starting out with 50 yards in the first half and 80 yards at the end of the 3rd quarter is not going to win us football games long term. And I predicted the Bears to win this game. And I'm not backing down or going to delete it or change my mind. But can we also be real about it? After 3 quarters of this game, you didn't think the Vikings were winning the game either. You had many questions and were doubting and were just not really believing in what you were seeing because there was nothing to see to believe, right? I mean, there was nothing the Vikings were doing that were convincing you that they were going to come back and win this game. And I think the magic behind McCarthy is that, yes, he impressed his teammates, but there was also a huge shock factor in this game because what we saw in the 4th quarter was invisible in the first 3 quarters. Like, there was nothing comparable in the first 3 quarters to what we saw in the 4th quarter. The 4th quarter performance was literally a magician taking a rabbit out of the hat because it was so shocking. But anyway, that's the take for the day. Check out Hoagland Farms Beef. They have the best rotationally grazed 100% grass-fed beef. Hoagland Farm Beef. Contact Jared at 952-491-1541. That's 952-491-1541. Hoagland Farms Beef. Steaks, chuck roast beef, all for around $4 a pound. You go to a store and it's $9 to $10 a pound. Hoagland Farms Beef has it for $4 a pound. Amazing. and it's 100% grass-fed. Contact Jared, tell him Tim sent you, and he'll give you 20% off your first order. 952-491-1541.